Here's a question for you. How is it possible that a relatively minor regulatory change could potentially cost you thousands of dollars, dozens of lost flight hours, and a whole lot of heartache? It's a question that we're going to answer right here, right now. Pat and I just did a video about the regulatory change that's about to take place on December 1st that refers to CFI certificates, certificated flight instructors, and how they renew their certificate. There will no longer be an expiration date on the certificate, and you say, I'm not a CFI, I don't care. I'm a private pilot, I'm a commercial pilot, I don't work as a CFI, it doesn't matter. Yes, it does. And actually, it could potentially be a real problem for you, even though you're not a CFI. Seriously, this really matters to the average general aviation pilot, especially over the next 2 to 3 years. I hope you'll take this seriously, because I wouldn't want it to impact you in a way that puts you in a real jam. We got a comment on that video that I absolutely loved. It came from the airplane driver, and he says this. Let me read it to you. You guys are great, and I love your videos, and we appreciate you watching. But I just don't see how this change is significant in any way. The only two changes are, one, we'll no longer get a new certificate every 2 years, so now my CFI certificate will look as ratty as my commercial certificate. And two, we can blow through the expiration date and now have a 90-day grace period to take the flight instructor refresher course. If we blow through the grace period, we still have to go through the hell that is the CFI check ride. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's what I got out of it. You're not missing much, airplane driver. Let me give you an example of how sometimes CFIs, very good people, decent people, families, go to church, have a job, all that sort of thing, some of them don't really take the privileges and responsibilities of being a CFI seriously. And that's an issue that can come back to bite any of us. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's a pilot who wants to fly a flying club airplane, but they're not current. They haven't flown in 90 days, so they need to go with a CFI in order to be current enough to take the airplane solo or with their family. No problem. The pilot grabs a CFI friend of theirs and says, let's go. I just need you to do what is essentially a flight review and sign me off so that I can take the airplane. And the CFI says, yeah, sure, we're buddies, we'll go do that. But the CFI is not taking this seriously. They haven't really planned a flight. Their intent is to just sit in the right seat and keep the left seater company, and everything will be okay. They'll fill out their paperwork. They've got an hour or two of flight time. Life is good. But when they get to the airport that they headed to for their little cross-country, grab lunch, whatever, on the landing, things don't go so well. And they end up leaving the runway, they go down into a ditch, and they seriously damage the airplane. Well, the guy in the left seat wasn't current to take the airplane, so he's saying, I washed my hands of this. This was an instructional flight. It's on the CFI. But the CFI is saying, wait, I wasn't actually acting as a CFI. I was just along for the ride. It was his flight. Now you have a problem, and you can see where this can be an issue that really affects the flying club, the pilot in the left seat, the insurance company. All kinds of people get involved now because the guy in the right seat, the CFI, wasn't really taking his responsibility seriously. This could be extrapolated into a scenario that you're the one in the left seat, and it could be a real problem. Let's say you're a primary student, or maybe you are a pilot and you're working on an advanced certificate or rating, an instrument rating, or a commercial. Maybe you're just average Joe or Josephine pilot and you're off for a flight review. And you grab a CFI who you've flown with before, really nice individual. They're not a full-time CFI, but they are a CFI, and you've flown with them, you like them, you've gotten along with them in the past. Let's go ahead and do that training that we have to do to get me to where I want to go. Right now, every CFI in America has an expiration date on their certificate. You could actually look at that certificate, and it's perfectly okay to ask your CFI to show you that they actually are a CFI. You can look at that expiration date on the certificate and say, yep, I'm good flying with this person. Starting next month in December 2024 and onward into the future, that's not going to be the case. There's going to be a recency of experience requirement, and those CFI certificates issued after December 1st, 2024 won't have an expiration date. So how do you know your CFI is actually a CFI, and why does that matter to you? Well, let's say you go do your primary training, all of it, and you go to your check ride. You're all excited and this is great. What if your CFI wasn't a CFI? What if they didn't meet the recency of experience requirements and they just didn't notice? They never went into IACRA and renewed. They didn't do the things they have to do. You've now done all your training and you've paid for a check ride that you're not qualified to take. You are not a pilot. You don't even get to legally log all those dual hours you did because you were flying illegally with somebody who's not a CFI. What if you just go for a flight review and you fly with the CFI you've been doing this with for years, and they're a part-timer and they're great and we've been friends for 20 years. Let's just go like we always do. What if you get through that flight review and they sign you off and everything's terrific and you end up running off a runway? You end up hitting a runway light. Something happens that requires an investigation. Maybe you're flying a Piper Arrow and having a great time and you get to your destination and the gear doesn't come down. And you go through all the emergency procedures and the gear still doesn't come down. And eventually you decide, I have to do a gear up landing. No big deal. You can do that. If you do it well, it's not that big a deal. It's not fun, but there's going to be very minor damage to the aircraft and you're going to walk away from this. But there is going to be an investigation. And as part of that investigation, they're going to look at your flight review. And when they look at your flight review, they're going to look at that flight instructor and they're going to realize that flight instructor lapsed. They're not actually a flight instructor. That means you're not actually flying as a current pilot who's got a flight review. That means your insurance company, who is going to look for every reason to not cover this, is going to say, oh no, you weren't current. That's on you. A minor regulatory change, something as simple as taking expiration dates off of the certificate that CFIs have, can leave you with a real jam. What about the CFI early on in this process who gets that first certificate sometime in 2025 that doesn't have the expiration date, and in 2027 doesn't meet the recency of experience or doesn't go into IACRA and record that recency of experience? We may have a population of flight instructors in the United States 2 years out from now who aren't CFIs and don't know they're not CFIs. And that's something every one of us should be concerned about. Their lack of preparation and record keeping is going to fall back on us as a real risk if we've used them in any way for required flight training. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching this. I really do think this is worth paying attention to because sometimes those small regulatory changes that happen, even changes that don't seem to affect us directly, do or could. And that's our responsibility as pilots in command. So when you get with a CFI down the road to do your flight review, to do your flight training, there is nothing wrong with saying, can you show me that you are a current active CFI? Can you show me that you meet recency experience? Because I'm about to make a fairly large investment in your time and experience. I'd like to know it's going to count. Thanks so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. It's always great to have you here. Click like on this video if you would. Leave us a comment, just like the airplane driver. Let us know what you think about this regulatory change or any regulatory change, because Mosaic is coming and that's going to be a big deal. Let us know what's happening in your mind, and of course, subscribe to the channel because it just makes our hearts aflutter. Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time right here on madPropsAero.